And when it comes to tapping into the wisdom of this philosophy, once you see it work, you can't go back. Once the mind is stretched by a new idea, you cannot go back to its previous dimensions. Oh, Danny boy. Oh, Danny boy. Oh, Danny boy. Danny, one of our listeners, shout out. Big dog, shout out. What started as just a song that I think about when I sit down in this chair has now become a call and response to one person that listens to these episodes, and there's only about 100 people that listen to these episodes. So each one's, well, I say each one's important, but I would do this if 3 people listened. So it's actually everybody's of equal value, even if it was 1,000, a couple thousand. In fact, I love these episodes so much that when I had my startup focused podcast called Below the Line, we'd get like 5,000 or 6,000 listens each episode, and founders in Silicon Valley. But man, I got to the point, I don't know if I ever really recounted this online or publicly, but I got to the point where I was like, I just don't have any interest in thinking about startup stuff anymore. All I can think about are these timeless philosophical concepts that change everything. These foundational things that make me such a better founder. Probably, and I've said this before on the podcast, 10x more effective with 1/10 the effort, which is probably a 100-fold increase. I guess mathematically it is a 100-fold increase in efficacy because of this philosophy, because of it, which is so often called the manual for living. It is the manual to where instead of just smashing buttons and hoping for good outcomes, I'm continually blown away by how damn practical this philosophy is. In addition to being timeless and dealing with the absolutes, but even in the relative sense, it is so helpful. If you want to perform, listen to startup podcasts. If you want to outperform, deeply reflect on timeless philosophical wisdom. And yet, some episodes, 40 people listen. What's great is I benefit no matter what, just talking about these things. It is so fun to think about what an episode is going to be about, try to construct the points, think through how to articulate it. It's like they say, do something that you would pay to do because you love it so much. That is your Swadharma, that's your nature. You love it so much, you feel so elevated just by the very nature of the action that you'd pay to do it. And now that I think about it, I do pay to do this. I was thinking I did it for free and then just realized I do pay Nick and Jose to edit these episodes and post them. So there you go. But like I said, cost benefit analysis, I benefit more than anyone by getting to talk about these and think about how to talk about these concepts. And the reflection for today is so related to this, that there's so much wisdom, truth in these principles within the philosophy of Advaita Vedanta that you just see it work over and over and over again. You see your internal peace and bliss grow, your effectiveness out there in the world just take on a completely different dimension because of the stillness. How well seated you are with each decision, the clarity in which you can see and discern what the right decision is. Like I said, you outperform everyone that is just thinking the second, third, fifth order of things instead of that first order foundational orientation of what we want, of what wanting does to us. of what we want beneath the symbols of the symbols of the symbols of the things that we say that we want. Why do you want a great career? Why do you want a spouse? Why do you want kids? Why do you want a home? Anything that's right in front of you that is that carrot of the day that's 3 feet in front of you, like, I'm going to walk towards that. I'm going to walk towards that. Why do we want that? And what do we want at the base, the foundation of all of these, as the Buddhists say, the 10,000 things that we're chasing? This philosophy said it so explicitly. I'd never heard it before. I'd never heard it stated so simply and explicitly that what you want is peace and prosperity. Not one or the other. You don't want prosperity at the sake of peace. You don't want peace having to worry about every bill. Peace is a function of, does your understanding supersede your conflict? Conflict on one level is harmony on another. So it's not about scrubbing your life clean of conflict. It's just, does your understanding supersede the conflict? A well-oiled machine of a business is built on a whole lot of conflict of, these customers aren't happy yet. These employees are great employees, but these others over here aren't great team members. And I'm going to have a whole lot of hard conversations during the course of a year to find the right team members. A whole lot of digestion of uncomfortable truths to get the product right, to fix this or that part of the business. It's a whole lot of, as I think Mark Cuban said, when you want to start a business, the whole world is telling you no. First customers that are like, no, I wouldn't buy that. Oh, this isn't good. Oh, I thought it was going to be this other thing. But if your understanding, if your mission supersedes the conflict of the day, then you end up with harmony. You're energized by it. It's not about getting rid of opposition. An airplane would not be able to rise without opposition. It's just basic physics. Requires it to be able to rise. You need that friction or the negative feedback to become a better version of yourself, to build a better version of a product if you're starting or building a business. Prosperity, that's a function of, does your means supersede your desires? Does your income supersede the desires you have? You can find that prosperity by growing that income. You can find that prosperity by minimizing those desires. But this philosophy also says, what is at the heart of even the desire for peace and prosperity? It's freedom. What we are chasing through every symbol of a symbol of a symbol of a thing that we want is freedom. And we just think it's through accumulating and assembling 10,000 things around us in our lives. And we end up with those 10,000 pursuits. All of those different things that we need to make us happy. And when it comes to tapping into the wisdom of this philosophy, once you see it work, you can't go back. I think a day or two ago, we touched on that old adage of, once the mind is stretched by a new idea, it cannot go back to its previous dimensions. When you pick up just one or two concepts that elevate you, your life, your community, your household, when you employ these concepts, when you pick them up and you start to employ them, like one recently we talked about was, reflection is 100,000 times more powerful than listening. So reflecting deeply on something that might have stopped you in your tracks, instead of just being like, wow, that's a really great quote or a really great point from, it could be St. Augustine, it could be Socrates, it could be a Vedantic principle. When you start to hear that reflection is 100,000 times more powerful than listening, you really stretch your mind to make room for that reflection is so much more powerful than just reading the next thing and the next thing and the next thing. You can't go back. Ram Dass would talk about how someone might be on a spiritual path for 2-3 years and then take a beat, take pause. They're back in the bar for 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 years, doing some of the same things they did before, but beneath the surface, it's only a matter of time before they come back, because once changed, they're changed forever. This philosophy is explicit when it says there are as many paths to God as there are people on earth. There is no one path. So this might not be the path for, it isn't the path for many people. Deep philosophical study and studying the words of the masters, reflecting deeply on conceptual frameworks and principles like we do within Vedanta, that's 1 in 10,000 find these things interesting. But for those that do, picking up 1 or 2 principles like gratitude and desire cannot coexist. Picking up 1 or 2 principles that you hear, you jot down, you reflect on it. It's like a fountain of truth. You now know where it is. And you might find value and feel a purification from that one principle for months or years. But now you know where that fountain is. And from the practical sense, just that principle, there's no going back to the person before that principle. But from the absolute sense, from that Ram Dass example of, you might be sitting at the bar, but it's not the same you that's drinking that beer. When we get transformed by truth, even if you feel like you're backsliding, there is no going back. That's the comforting side, is if you feel like, I'm backsliding, well, you can put those concerns to rest, because there's no going back. Every stock at Amazon, $1 trillion company, even it has ups and downs, ups and downs, ups and downs. Progress, I say this all the time to startup founders, that progress looks like 5 steps forward, 3 steps back, 4 steps forward, 2 steps back. That's just the nature of trekking forward. So even when you think you're backsliding, that's just a temporary, natural part of what progress looks like. So if you have those concerns of backsliding, that's the comforting side of this. The slightly uncomfortable side of this. And the Gita, Arjuna sees the cosmic form of who he thought was his charioteer, this warrior prince, asks to see the real form of his charioteer, who he's starting to discover is not his charioteer, is not just his childhood friend, but happens to be the symbolic embodiment of God. And this conversation, this dialogue, this 30-minute dialogue in the Bhagavad Gita between the warrior prince and his charioteer, who's so much more than his charioteer. About 20 minutes into the conversation, he says, well, if you are who you say you are, I want to see your cosmic form. And he gets so scared, so frightened by seeing the cosmic form of divinity that he says, can you please return to your prior form? It is sobering and can be quite unnerving to touch a grounding wire of truth. Sobers us up, and it's like, oh God. Like that quote from Joseph Campbell that I say often of, the treasure you seek is in the cave you least want to enter. When I heard that, it was 5 years before I actually heeded the call. But I remember hearing that and being like, oh, shit. Oh, I know that's true. And like a reverberation of a bell, I could not unhear it. I just kept hearing the reverberations for years. Till 5 years later, accepting, okay, I got to go in the cave. Start this company that I swore I would never start another company ever again. Because it was so painful previous time, and it's such a You think it's going to be a self-aggrandizement, and it's just, in my 20s, the company that, with the experience where I said I was never going to start a company ever again, it was such a self-annihilation. So just, it completely destroyed me. Not completely, almost destroyed me. That I was like, I'm never doing that again. And 5 years later, even my executive coach, when I told him about this business idea, he's like, nah, I don't think you should. I think you need to take a break. I would advise against it. So my own executive coach was saying, I don't know if building another startup is in your cards. And yet, those words rung in my ears for years and years until it was, yeah, it might be self-annihilation, but that's the philosophical. I mean, what am I studying this philosophy for if I'm not going to use it in my daily life to surrender to some skill I might have that might kill me? So oftentimes, these revelations of truth, if you're really listening, oftentimes they will scare the living shit out of you. But even for Arjuna, even when his charioteer returned to the friendly form he was used to, he couldn't unsee what he had seen. He couldn't unhear what he had heard. That's the uncomfortable side of no going back. When you're on this path and you're like, oh my God, my friends, my family, my girlfriend, my boyfriend, my spouse, they might have no clue why I keep reading, listening, reflecting on these ancient, seemingly esoteric principles, but I can't shove them in a drawer and act like they don't exist. Even if you really wish you could sometimes. And there's no organizational or communal structure that like says, you need to stick with it. There's no Roman Catholic hierarchical structure that says like, if it doesn't make sense to you, that's part of the mystery. Or a couple hundred years ago, if you don't say these words in exact order, then we will kill you. The example I've been thinking about the last few weeks since I heard it, the scholar that published the Bible in English from Latin was burned at the stake. So, fortunately for you and me, there is no organizational pressure. There's no threat of excommunication or being burned at the stake. You just see the truth of these principles on an individual, independent basis. And you're like, God, that is so true. That worked. That was exactly my experience said in a way that I'd never heard it said. That was exactly what I needed to hear at that moment or this moment, or that helped me with the exact thing I was struggling with that day, that week, that month, and you can't unhear it. You can't go back. But between the uncomfortable side of that and the comfortable side of it, it is also quite simple. It's like water in the desert and knowing where to get it. And people try to sell you a mirage, something that you know is not water, through experience or through wisdom. And you now know where to get the real thing. Once you know it, there is no going back. And I'm not saying this is the path or this is the truth. But if you're a few episodes in and this speaks to you, like many before you and many after you, if part of it speaks to you, I bet a whole lot of it will speak to you. And for worse or for better. In the midst of fearing there is some backsliding, I'm here to tell you there is no going back. That is today's reflection on the Daily Vedantic. We'll see you next time.